I'm Conrad Vale, 70 years old. I've spent most of my life repairing watches, small gears, quiet work. Time for me was always something you observed, not something you fought. But that morning I woke up to a message that told me someone had tried to steal mine. The wedding was already in motion. Ivy, my granddaughter, looked beautiful under the white arch outside Whitcomb Country Club. Laughter jazz music passed hors d'oeuvres. The whole production reeked of money and curated taste. None of it mine. I sat at a linen-covered table near the bar, a fresh cup of weak coffee by my hand, the kind they serve after the ceremony and before the real drinking starts. I was wearing the same navy blazer I've had for 10 years. Still fit, still quiet. My phone buzzed once. Harbor and Stone Credit Union line of credit draw $450,000. Account ending in 0642. Transaction recorded at 09:15 a.m. $450,000. My name was on that account. But my hand was not on the pen. I looked across the room. Laurel, my daughter, in pale green silk, swirling a glass of champagne. Miles, my son-in-law, by her side, kissing cheeks and shaking hands like a senator in training. They weren't nervous. They weren't surprised. They were winning. I slid the phone into my inner coat pocket and reached for a napkin. Inside it, folded once, was a receipt from Riverview Coffee, $3, time-stamped 09:16 a.m. That receipt was going to be important, not because of the money, though I've always liked receipts, but because of what it said about where I was when that draw happened. Laurel and Miles thought they had everything figured out. They had activated a power of attorney, one that named them as agents on my behalf, one that gave them access. They must have believed it was ironclad. But here's the thing. Mine was a springing POA, the kind that doesn't come into play unless I'm mentally incapacitated. And for that, you need one thing. A doctor's letter, signed, resent, notarized, delivered. They didn't have one. Because I didn't give them one. Because I wasn't out of my mind, not then, not now. I took another sip of coffee and watched the guests file in for the reception. White chairs, gold trim, hand-calligraphed place cards. Expensive. Miles must have prepaid the venue, or maybe not yet. At exactly 12:32, my phone buzzed again. It was a short message from the escrow officer managing the event deposit. Escrow ID 887349. Pending release of $17,800 for catering and venue services. Alert triggered irregular signature validation. I read it twice. $17,800. The cogs turned. They were trying to move fast. They thought I'd be too proud to cause a scene. That I'd smile and let the day go on all while their bank accounts fattened and mine bled out. They didn't know I had called Rufus Keene a private investigator 2 weeks ago. They didn't know I'd already seen the deed filings, or the chat logs, or the late-night smart lock logs from the Ring camera on the front porch of the house they claimed was theirs. They didn't know that I'd brought everything with me. Because what they also didn't know, or had forgotten, was that I don't raise my voice. I raise document. The DJ started spinning something by Frank Sinatra. The servers began pouring wine. Ivy was radiant as ever, laughing with her new husband near the head table. She didn't deserve to be part of this. But I wasn't going to ruin her day. I was going to ruin their plan. Laurel passed by me with a slice of cake on a plate and a tight smile. "You all right, Dad?" she asked. "Sure," I said, sipping. "Just enjoying the music." Miles joined in. "Big day for Ivy, huh? All grown up?" I smiled at him. Big day for someone all right. He tilted his head, probably wondering what I meant. He'd find out. Because I hadn't come empty-handed. Inside the leather folio on the chair next to me were 8 printed pages. The county clerk deed report, the escrow conditions, a notarized codicil, and 1 email thread labeled Parson Prize Chat. They had left fingerprints all over it. There's a saying in my line of work, the one I left behind when arthritis made it too hard to hold tweezers. Every watch tells time, but the ones that tick too loud usually fake. I was ready to wind this one back to 0. The MC tapped his glass at the microphone. The room hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for the first toast of the evening?" I glanced at the phone. Buzz. A new message had come in. The escrow officer again. "Mr. Vale, do you authorize an emergency hold on the event deposit grounds signature dispute plus trust asset involvement?" My thumb hovered over the screen. I took one last sip of that lukewarm coffee and pressed yes. The glass never left my hand. But the toast, it was already mine. 2 weeks earlier, I paid a man named Rufus Keene $300 in cash, and handed him a single piece of paper. On it were three things: Laurel's full name, Miles's work address, and the parcel ID for the Kingsmere property. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Rufus was a former insurance fraud investigator with eyes like frostbite and a voice that never rose above a whisper. He nodded, folded the paper, and said, "Only, give me 3 days." He gave me 2. What he brought back was worth every cent, and then some. The Kingsmere property, according to the Fairfield County Clerk's database, had been transferred just 6 weeks earlier. The deed named Miles Parson alone as grantee. No mention of Laurel, no mention of me. But here's the twist: the purchase wasn't done through a regular transaction. It had passed through a limited liability company, Kingsmere Holdings LLC. Shell companies are useful for people who want assets but not attention. But that only works when the paperwork doesn't speak louder than your smile. Thanks to Rufus, I had copies of the original deed, the title chain, and a memo from the lien department. There was already a preliminary lien filed from Harbor and Stone, the same credit union that had pinged me about that $450,000 draw. They'd gotten to work quickly. Too quickly. Because when you rush, you leave smudges. And the smudges were everywhere. The LLC formation documents listed Miles as managing member, the registered agent, a virtual office in New Haven, the email address, a burner domain, kingsmerehome@mailvault.co, registered to a prepaid data plan in Maryland. That wasn't even the good part. The good part came in the form of a group chat screenshot Rufus pulled from Laurel's old iCloud backup. Apparently, she hadn't changed her password in years. He printed it in full color. The chat was titled Parson Prize. In the thread, dated just 4 days before the wedding, Laurel wrote, "The loan is in Miles, got the papers notarized. Just need Dad's signature and we're golden." Miles replied with a gif of fireworks. Ivy even chimed in with a, "Don't forget to invite the old man to the party he's funding." That part stung. I'd always thought Ivy was just busy, not in on it. Maybe she was joking, or maybe she knew exactly what she was saying. I wasn't sure yet, but the screenshot was undeniable. 3 people, 1 plan, 1 man in the dark. Me. I held the paper in my hands in the back seat of a taxi heading downtown. The cab smelled like yesterday's coffee and overcooked heat. Outside, the trees along Riverside Road had started to turn gold and amber like they'd been brushed by fire. I didn't feel angry, just resolved. I went home that night and pulled out my trust binder. Years ago, I'd worked with a law firm in Stamford to set up a revocable living trust. It was a simple mechanism, nothing flashy, just enough to avoid probate when the time came. My house, my car, even the small stock portfolio I never talked about all flowed into it. Alongside that was a pour-over will, the kind that neatly directs any straggling assets back into the trust in case anything gets left behind. It had one job: keep my affairs mine. They'd never asked about it, probably didn't know it existed. Most people don't think the old man with the watchmaker hands knows how to spell LLC, let alone build one. They were wrong. And I wasn't done. That same night, I opened a second manila folder and pulled out a codicil. It was short, 2 paragraphs, and a signature block, notarized, clean. It amended the operating agreement for Kingsmere Holdings LLC, naming me as holder of 51% of the voting interest retroactive to the day it was formed. That document had been quietly filed with the Secretary of State 2 days prior. All it needed was a little light. And the wedding. That would provide plenty. The next morning, I made 2 calls. One to Ada Sloan, my estate attorney, asking her to prep a release letter and review quitclaim deed templates. The second to a mobile notary who promised to be on standby within a 10-minute drive of the Whitcomb Ballroom. Backup was in motion. Then came the cherry on top, something small, almost petty, but too perfect to ignore. A thread on Nextdoor, the neighborhood app for suburban surveillance and polite gossip, titled, "Loud Mercedes Outside Kingsmere Again." It was dated 2 weeks earlier, timestamped just after midnight. The comment thread was brutal. Some folks think they own the block just because they bought a 5-bedroom. Do we know who moved in? I thought that place was under renovation. HOA should issue another fine. This is the 3rd complaint. The Kingsmere HOA had in fact issued a fine, $42, for violation of quiet hours. I had a copy of the violation letter. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something provable. A line in the sand, printed and signed. I planned to read that fine out loud later in the middle of the reception, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. They had moved in like it was theirs. But I wasn't finished being mine. The house on Kingsmere Drive has a camera above the front door, a black ring unit I installed myself back when I was still allowed to hold the keys. It records video in color, stores everything in the cloud, motion-triggered, time-stamped. And at 12:37 a.m., 5 nights before the wedding, it caught my daughter unlocking the front door with a smart lock keycard and carrying in a black rolling case about the size of a mini-safe. She wasn't alone. Miles followed behind, checking over his shoulder like a man in a bad heist movie. The footage is silent, but you can see her lips form the words, "Leave it in the office." That office used to be mine. They weren't just squatting, they were nesting. And that video, I planned to play it. Not for the guests, not for the bride and groom. For Miles and Laurel right after I exposed their little fantasy of ownership. I had already revoked their access to the Ring account, changed the 2-factor codes, updated the passwords, but I kept that clip downloaded on my phone and on a thumb drive in my jacket pocket. Still, the video wasn't the kill shot, it was just the opening blow. The real leverage came in a document most people ignore until they're half dead: the power of attorney. They assumed it gave them the right to pull 6 figures from my credit line, to sign my name on deeds, to authorize payments from trusts they never created. But they overlooked one line buried in paragraph 4, subsection B. This instrument shall only be activated upon written confirmation by a licensed physician of the principal's mental incapacity, delivered and notarized within 90 days of such determination. It's called a springing POA, not active until triggered, and triggers require documentation. I wasn't incapacitated, I wasn't confused, and I sure as hell wasn't absent. So I got a letter. Dr. Elkin, my primary physician for the last 20 years, wrote it himself, on formal letterhead, dated 2 weeks ago. It stated in no uncertain terms: at the time of this examination, Mr. Conrad Vale presents no cognitive impairment or medical condition that would prevent him from managing his personal, legal, or financial affairs. Signed, notarized, certified copy in triplicate. That letter made the power of attorney void. No authority, no legitimacy, no right to sign anything in my name. And they didn't know I had it, not yet. Later I'd present it publicly at the reception, and when I did, I would watch them fold. But I wasn't done collecting tools. That same week I received a HOA notice by certified mail, Kingsmere Neighborhood Council, pale green envelope. Inside, a formal violation: unauthorized entry after quiet hours. Guest vehicle observed idling beyond midnight. Fine assessed $42. $42. It's not a lot, but it's everything. Because it proves they were there, after midnight, unauthorized, loud, documented. I folded the notice carefully and slid it between the trust papers in my leather folio. Every line was becoming a nail. And now the final thread: the notary. Her name was Monica Bell. I'd hired her once years ago to witness a transfer of my mother's antiques. Professional, punctual. She agreed to be on standby the entire evening, no questions asked. She texted me that morning. 5 minutes away. Just say the word. I'll bring the seal. All I had to do was time it right. As the jazz band warmed up for cocktail hour, I stepped outside for some air. The manicured hedges along the edge of the Whitcomb patio were trimmed into little domes, uniform, compliant, just like the people inside. I lit a cigarette, my one vice, and checked the ring footage again. Laurel's face in the grainy glow of porch light, Miles dragging that black box behind him, the timestamp blinking like a ticking watch. I took a breath and walked back in. The MC was preparing the welcome toast. The guests had begun to take their seats. Waiters zipped between tables, trays full of flutes and folded napkins. Ivy was radiant at the head table, unaware that half the room's payments had been powered by forgery. Laurel noticed me return and gave a wave. Miles raised his glass. I raised my phone. One new message. From escrow. Deposit verification flagged. Do you want to initiate? Hold. Must confirm. Within 10 minutes. I tapped out a reply with one hand. Yes, authority disputed. Do not release. Then I looked at my watch. The toast would begin in exactly 4 minutes. Time enough for a reckoning. The MC tapped his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask for your attention for just a moment. The clinking slowed. Forks hit porcelain. Even the band quieted their warm-up. I stayed seated. At the front of the ballroom, Ivy's husband stood, shoulders stiff in his tux. His toast was probably printed and folded in his breast pocket like most new grooms. He smiled toward Ivy. She smiled back. I didn't want to ruin her moment. But I did want the people who used her wedding as a money laundering opportunity to feel the full weight of silence. My phone buzzed gently under the tablecloth. Escrow message. Last chance to initiate hold. Confirm yes to freeze $17,800. I took a breath, adjusted the crease in my napkin, reached for my phone and typed one word. Yes. No announcement, no drama. Just pause. 10 seconds later, the venue's lead coordinator stepped out from behind the curtain and whispered something into the MC's ear. His eyes widened, then darted toward the back of the room. Mine. The band trailed off mid-chord. A server nearly dropped a tray of drinks. Laurel, seated near the head table, looked confused. Miles's jaw stiffened. He knew. I stood slowly. My knees ached, but I didn't rush. I took the microphone from the MC with a polite nod and turned to face the room. I won't be long, I said, and I won't be loud. Some guests chuckled nervously, others leaned in. I reached into my jacket and pulled out 2 pieces of paper neatly folded. The first was the deposit authorization. This, I said, holding it up, is a confirmation notice for a line of credit withdrawal dated this morning, $450,000 signed supposedly by me. A murmur stirred. I let it hang. The problem island. I was buying a $3 coffee at Riverview when it happened. I pulled the second slip, a coffee receipt marked 09:16 a.m. A few gasps, a few coughs. Miles looked like he wanted to disappear into the centerpiece. Laurel reached for his hand. I saw her whisper something, probably. Stay calm. I turned to the coordinator. I've placed a temporary hold on today's payment, $17,800 to this venue and its catering services, until some paperwork is sorted. The coordinator blinked, clearly caught between protocol and panic. Don't worry, I added. No one's being stiffed, just paused. The guests were shifting now. Some looked curious, some looked uncomfortable. The groom looked like he wanted to teleport. Then, without warning, Miles stood up. Conrad, what are you doing? He asked, his voice louder than mine had been all year. I'm stopping fraud, I said plainly, and taking my time doing it. He moved toward me, chest puffed. You're making a scene. I raised a hand. Not to hit, just to pause him. I didn't sign that draw, I said, and the power of attorney you're relying on was never triggered. I reached for my folio, unzipped it, and pulled out the letter from Dr. Elkin. No cognitive impairment, I read. No incapacity, which means no authority. Then I turned to the room. You see, a power of attorney can't be used unless it's active. Mine is not. So every transaction that's been filed under my name, every draw, every deed was done illegally. The silence sharpened. Someone near the back whispered, Did he say illegal? Laurel stood now. Dad, please, this isn't the time. No, I agreed. It was the time when you broke into my house at 12:37 a.m. with a smart lock keycard and a suitcase. Gasps. I turned the microphone so the room could hear. You see, that was caught on Ring camera. Laurel entering my home unauthorized. Miles trailing behind her. You even left the porch light on. I slipped the thumb drive onto the notary's table beside me. And for the record, Kingsmere HOA fined you $42 for violating quiet hours. Someone near the bar laughed short, awkward. I looked directly at Miles now. There's a mobile notary just outside the door. You'll be signing something tonight after all. He didn't reply. He looked like a man standing in wet concrete. I stepped away from the mic. My voice never rose. But the room had stopped breathing. People always assume the loudest voice wins the room. They forget documents have longer wings than rumors, and once they take flight, there's no catching them. I handed the microphone back to the MC. He didn't reach for it, just stepped away, hands up like I'd pulled a fire alarm. I didn't blame him. The notary, Monica Bell, entered quietly from the rear doors, carrying a small black case. She didn't need direction. She'd been briefed. She walked toward me, nodded once, and set the case on the table near the cake display. No one clapped. No one cheered. The bride looked frozen. I couldn't read her. Miles looked ready to bolt. I took out the physician's letter from my folio and handed it to Monica. Please note, I said calmly, that the springing power of attorney naming these two I gestured to Laurel and Miles was never valid. Monica read the heading, the signature, the stamp. I turned back to the crowd. I am not, nor have I recently been mentally incapacitated. I am in full control of my faculties. That POA was misused, prematurely activated, and therefore void. The word void hit like a dropped dish. Someone near the dance floor muttered, "Oh wow." I continued. Transactions performed under that authority, including the line of credit withdrawal, escrow deposits, and real estate filings, were made without legal standing. Laurel's face flushed a pale red. She opened her mouth but said nothing. I didn't wait for her. Next, I produced the codicil. 1 page, certified, clear. This, I said, is a recent and valid amendment to the operating agreement for Kingsmere Holdings LLC, the shell company used to transfer ownership of the house on Kingsmere Drive. I paused. It names me as holding 51% of the voting interest in that company. A quiet gasp rippled through the back row. Laurel looked at Miles. Miles stared at the ground. I placed the document beside Monica's case. Filed, recorded, recognized. No bluster, just fact. Then I opened my phone and scrolled to an email. To protect the residents, I said I've revoked access to the Kingsmere smart lock system. New access codes have been issued. All old entries are disabled. I hit send. Somewhere across town, the front door lock on their precious 5-bedroom home just blinked red. Attempting to enter without permission, I said, will now constitute trespassing. That got their attention. Laurel stood trembling. Dad, please, this isn't how families handle things. No, I said. This is how families fix things after they're broken. I turned to Monica. There's one document left. She opened her case and pulled out a quitclaim deed, the legal form transferring any claim Miles held in the Kingsmere property over to the LLC under my control. It had one blank line, one signature space. I placed it flat on the table and held out a pen. Miles didn't move. Sign it, I said gently. He looked around the room. Cameras were out now, people filming, whispers behind hands. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a public audit. I'm not, he started, voice cracked. This isn't legal. Monica cleared her throat. This deed is pre-filled, Mr. Parson. Your name is accurate as verified through the county clerk. Your legal counsel can contest it later if you choose. But escrow will not unfreeze the funds until the ownership is clarified. Miles looked like a man trapped in a burning elevator. He glanced at Laurel. She shook her head. Her lips curled in something between anger and despair. Monica waited. The pen sat still. A beat. Then another. And finally he took it. His hand trembled. His signature was smaller than I remembered. But it was there. Signed, dated. Monica notarized it on the spot. The room exhaled. The temperature shifted. Someone at table 6 started clapping. 1 awkward beat, then 2. It didn't catch on. Didn't need to. I folded the deed and handed it back to Monica. Thank you, I said. She nodded. I'll scan and file within the hour. County clerk will receive confirmation by tomorrow morning. Miles returned to his seat like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I turned toward the bar. A glass of water was waiting. No one had touched it. I drank slow. The groom finally gave his toast 10 minutes late, 2 octaves higher than he intended. Ivy's hands were tight in her lap the whole time. She didn't look at me. I didn't blame her. But I'd done what needed to be done. Quietly, thoroughly, and legally. Some men shout, others sue. I just notarize. The ink from Miles's signature was still drying when Monica handed me the duplicate copy of the quitclaim deed. Her stamp glowed faintly under the ballroom lights like a quiet seal of judgment. You'll get a digital version by end of day, she said, slipping the original into a plastic sleeve. I'll file it with the county clerk first thing tomorrow morning. I nodded. Copy Ada Sloan at the firm. She's holding the trust records. Monica tapped it into her case and disappeared as efficiently as she'd arrived. No wasted words. No hand-wringing. The guests didn't know what to do next. Some sipped awkwardly from half-full glasses, others avoided eye contact entirely. The wedding had become something else, a transaction in reverse. Laurel remained, seated, her hands folded so tight the knuckles went white. Miles beside her kept one palm flat on the table like he was bracing for another tremor. I wasn't interested in punishing them. I was interested in finishing what they started correctly. I approached the venue's event coordinator at the side of the room. She looked pale. Will the escrow release still go through? She asked carefully. In due time, I said. Once my attorney confirms Miles's interest in the property has been legally transferred to the LLC, I'll authorize the release of the $17,800 being held. She gave a sharp nod. Understood. That actually helps a lot. She meant the caterers were starting to sweat. Back at my table, I pulled out the slim LLC binder I'd built over the past month. Kingsmere Holdings LLC. A boring name for a sharp blade. My codicil granted me 51% voting control, and now with Miles's quitclaim, the other 49% no longer meant much. He could hold on to it symbolically. Legally, I controlled the property. But I wasn't greedy. The trust would hold the house until either I passed or chose to sell. Laurel and Ivy could make their case later civilly on paper, without forged power of attorney documents or midnight entries with smart keys. They'd used deceit to build a fantasy. And now I owned that fantasy on record. Someone from Laurel's side of the family approached me near the bar, her aunt, I think, woman in a coral dress, perfume heavy. "You really had to do it here?" she asked, lips tight. I looked her in the eye. "I didn't do it here. They did." She didn't reply, just walked off like she'd stepped in something sticky. Let them whisper. I wasn't here to win votes. I was here to remind them that ownership is not about volume, it's about proof. And the proof had just been sealed by a notary public under the watch of 70 wedding guests, 3 video phones, 1 event coordinator, and a half-eaten tower of lemon cake. I sat again, hands folded neatly on the tablecloth. The groom was trying to give his speech, but the mic buzzed and his voice wobbled. He said something about love and perseverance. Nobody laughed at his joke. Ivy looked torn, somewhere between embarrassment and sorrow. I wasn't proud of how today played out. But I was proud I didn't let it play out in silence. Laurel finally stood and came to my table. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply said, "We needed help, Dad." I met her gaze. Help is something you ask for, not steal. Her chin quivered. "I didn't think you'd fight." "That," I said, "was your second mistake." She blinked. "And the first." I leaned back, assuming I wouldn't notice. A beat passed between us, the kind that lasts longer than applause. Then she turned and walked away. Miles didn't even look up. I slid the bank alert from my pocket, once more line of credit, draw $450,000, and placed it inside my folio beside the trust documents and the deed. I folded the folio shut. All signatures complete. All positions clarified. All false authority revoked. The band began to play again, softer this time, like a new beginning, or maybe just a patch over an old crack. I sipped water, watched the lights dim, and thought not every war ends with fire. Some end with a pen. It's strange the sound a room makes after power shifts hands. It doesn't roar. It just breathes differently. The deed was signed, the notary gone. The ballroom lights flickered once before steadying. Outside, the sun dipped behind the hedges at Whitcomb, and with it the last chance for Laurel and Miles to pretend nothing had happened. Now it was time to make the ledger whole. I opened the small leather binder again. Inside, right behind the codicil, sat the revocable trust declaration. It had been drafted 10 years ago after my second heart scare. I'd never needed it until now. Its purpose was simple: to protect everything I built from becoming a playground for other people's shortcuts. It listed 2 residential properties, a modest portfolio of municipal bonds, my savings accounts, the Kingsmere house newly reacquired, and a few lingering shares of Belcour Precision, the last job I held before retiring from the watch trade. In total, $1.2 million conservatively estimated. Not a fortune by Wall Street standards, but enough to draw blood when people assume you won't fight for it. I didn't announce it like a boast, just handed a copy of the summary sheet to the event coordinator and to the escrow officer via secure email. My message was brief. Per attached trust documents and deed transfer, I authorized the release of $17,800 for the Whitcomb wedding event. Funds held as of 11:15 a.m. are now cleared. Then I leaned back and took another sip of water. Escrow responded 6 minutes later. Confirmed. Release in progress. Timestamped authorization recorded. The band played a slow jazz number. The reception carried on stiffly quietly. Some guests left early. Others hovered by the open bar, half hoping more drama might unfold. But I had nothing else to give them. Everything important was already signed. Later, I met with the caterer myself out back near the kitchen exit. The head chef, a wiry man in a black apron, seemed more anxious than anyone else. "I just wanted to say," he muttered, "we didn't know about any of this." I nodded. "You're doing your job, nothing more." He looked relieved. "It's just not every day someone halts a payment mid-wedding." I allowed myself a smile. It's not every day someone uses their father's name to fund it. Back inside, I found the event coordinator again. "I'll make sure the release hits your vendor ledger before midnight," I said. "You can resume full service now." She blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes. The show goes on." Laurel didn't approach me again. Neither did Miles. Ivy offered a glance hard to read, but said nothing. Maybe she was stunned, maybe ashamed, or maybe just grateful that the wreckage hadn't landed on her bridal veil. The master of ceremonies returned to the microphone with a forced chuckle. "Well, folks, let's move forward into dinner and dancing, and let's all raise a glass to clarity in all its forms." A few laughs, a few clinks. It would pass eventually. Everything does. Before I left, I sent one final email, this time to the county clerk's office, attaching scanned versions of the notarized quitclaim, deed and trust documents, CCing my attorney. No fanfare, no demands. Just, "Please file as permanent record, deed revision per enclosed signatures, trust-backed LLC now sole holder." As I exited the ballroom, the fall air had turned crisp, the kind that makes your bones feel older but your mind sharper. I looked up once at the lit windows of the venue. Somewhere up there, people were slow dancing. Others were trying to forget what they saw. But nobody could say I hadn't warned them. Nobody could say I hadn't come prepared. And nobody, not Laurel, not Miles, not any would-be grifter with a copy of my signature, would ever touch my name again without meeting my pen first. The ledger was balanced. Not with rage, not with yelling, but with paper. And that to me is the most powerful sound in the world. Weddings end the way good lies do, quickly and without applause. By the time I returned home that night, the reception hall was half empty. Guests filtered out in little knots, whispering like they'd just come from a courtroom, which in a way they had. I didn't stay for the bouquet toss. Didn't wait for cake. I had no interest in champagne or slow dances. I left with my folio tucked under my arm, the deed signed, the escrow released, and the story already writing itself on a dozen neighborhood group chats. The front porch light at Kingsmere blinked on as I pulled into the driveway. The smart lock let out its familiar chime. Access reprogrammed. No Laurel, no Miles, no surprises. Inside, everything was still where I left it. The old grandfather clock in the entryway, the cedar trim along the hall, my slippers by the radiator. I stood in the doorway a long time. You never really know what you've protected until you lose it or come close. This house wasn't just real estate. It was mine before they tried to hide it behind an LLC. It held memories, photographs, mistakes, things I never bragged about but still needed to keep. I sat down in the kitchen, wrote a check for $42, and addressed it to Kingsmere HOA, the fine for that late-night intrusion. I underlined the memo, violation ref. 19B. Late-night noise, unauthorized vehicle. Petty maybe, but precise. Across town, I imagined Laurel and Miles sitting in a dark apartment trying to explain to Ivy why the venue froze the catering, why the guests whispered through dinner, why their names had started circulating on Nextdoor under a post titled, "Anyone else at that wedding disaster at Whitcomb?" I didn't need to read the comments. I knew the tone. "Poor girl. Groom's family sketchy. Did you hear it involved a house deed? Something about escrow and bank fraud. Social capital bleeds quickly in places like Greenwich, especially when the paper trail is public." The next morning, my attorney forwarded a receipt from the county clerk's office. Deed transfer recorded. Effective date previous business day. Trust assets updated. Another message confirmed the line of credit draw was being reversed. Miles had called the bank before midnight trying to negotiate. It didn't go well. Without a valid POA, they had no basis for the transaction. The money never fully moved. Now it wouldn't. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reestablishing facts. The kind you can hold in your hand, not just believe in. That afternoon, I placed the updated documents in my home safe, added a note. For Ivy, read before you trust anyone who calls you family and asks for a signature. Then I closed the drawer. And Saturday. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing more to do. The house was still. The lock clicked softly into place. And somewhere in the quiet of the evening, I let two thoughts settle like dust. I don't raise my voice. I raise documents. And their signatures. They built this house for me.